Okay, so hello and welcome everyone to Be Waste Wise webinar this month. I'm Akanksha Singh, as most of you will know. I'm the community builder at Be Waste Wise, and we've been organizing such waste dialogues on monthly basis, addressing the need for knowledge dissemination on waste management since 2013. We are a nonprofit organization, and we've been bridging this waste solutions expertise gap worldwide over a decade now. And if you see the value in making such diverse sustainability dialogues such as these, catering to various geographies, free of charge to anyone and everyone, then please support us in our mission. We'll be sharing our donation page link over the chat as well. Now, moving on to the discussion today, the Indian government recently proposed new waste management rules, and these policies they aim to significantly improve the garbage disposal practices across the country. We have with our panel today who will be examining and going into deep discussion on such new rules. Does they really have the potential to drastically change waste management practices across India? Where is the gap and how we can solve this issue? We have with the panel and our moderator, Professor Brajesh Dubey. He is presently the professor of resource recovery and circular engineering at Department of Civil Engineering and chair of School of Water Resources at IIT Kharagpur. He is very well known globally as a waste resource management and life cycle analysis and decarbonization expert. Along with him, he'll be discussing this over the panel with Dr. Parimita Dey. She is a city planner with over 27 years of experience in urban development and has been with NIUA for 19 years. She heads the Resource and Waste Unit at the NIUA and is a leader for Sustainable Cities Integrated Approach Project at the same organization. We also have Tathagat Ghosh. He's from JSW Foundation. He's a sustainability practitioner with 12 plus experience in waste management and the circular economy. He has led initiatives spanning integrated waste facilities, informal sector inclusion, and data driven operational models across various geographies and organizations. So, we welcome you here for this session, Tathagat. We have Nidhi, who's a passionate social worker with 6 years of experience in solid waste management and community outreach. As a senior manager for outreach and partnerships at Waste Warriors, she leads initiatives to promote sustainable waste practices in the Indian Himalayan region. We also have Professor Uday Shankar. He is an associate professor at the Rajiv Gandhi School of Intellectual Property Law, IIT Kharagpur. He has been teaching and researching law for more than 20 years now, and he's also the member of International Association of Constitutional Law and also a life member of the Indian Law Institute, Delhi. So now, before we proceed with the discussion, I would like to make few important announcements. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded on our YouTube channel and on our website. Please request all the attendees to use the Q&A function for all your queries to the panel. And use the chat function separately for your views, for your opinions, and also to share your experience, your case studies, your work related to this particular topic and for interaction and for networking purposes as well. We'll be sharing our panelist LinkedIn profiles, and I can see already been done by the panelist over the chat. So without taking much time, over to you, Professor Dubey.
Thank you. Thank you, Akansha, for the setting the stage. So we'll get started right away. And before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge Professor David Wilson, who is there in the audience. I just saw him. Actually, we all learned solid waste reading his articles. So it's really honor for us that Professor Wilson has joined from UK. He is presently at Imperial College London. So thank you, sir, for joining here. And we'd like to hear your thoughts towards the end as well. So let's get started. As you have seen this topic, those of you who have joined, so good morning, good evening, good afternoon, based on wherever you are. On my behalf and on behalf of all the panelists, I welcome you. So this panel is on looking at bridging policy and practice. Our India's solid waste rules are delivering. So if you look at as a country in India, we are at very interesting juncture. We have put several progressive waste management policies. If you think from a developing world, we had solid waste management rules. Now we have the draft 2024 rules, which is being looked into. EPR uh, uh, is being discussed on different aspects. We have specific rules for plastics, electronic waste, construction and demolition debris. So on paper, the framework is robust and it's forward looking. So it does emphasize on segregation at source, does emphasize on resource recovery, does emphasizes on EPR and also on circular economy principle. So, but when we look at the cities around cities and towns, in many cities and towns, the realities it tells us a different story. So we see that implementation remains uneven. Some places we are doing good, but we are still struggling in basic collection segregation. Informal sector, which handles a significant share, continues to remain outside formal planning. That financial aspect is also it's financial institutional coordination that is also lagging behind the policy intent. So this brings us to the central question for today, which we'll be discussing. I'm really fortunate to have the four panelists. So why does focus will be on why does the policy practice gap persist and what can be done to close it? Do our institution have the capacity? Are our financing and incentive structure aligned with sustainability development goals? And perhaps most importantly, how do we move citizens from awareness to genuinely behavior change? So as we discuss the issue today, and as Akanksha also mentioned, we want all the participants also to share your views through the question and answer. We have a Q&A like a link. You can put your Q&A there. You can put your thoughts on the chat and questions on Q&A, and put anything you have, anything you want to share, feel free to do that. That's what the beauty of this particular platform. We want to listen from all of us who is present today. So we'll talk about, is it just merely a technical challenge? What is the question of governance? What is the question of economics? What is the question of collective responsibility? So if India can bridge the gap between the strong policy intent and the on-ground delivery, we can build a foundation for truly circular and sustainable future, because waste actually is central to all that. So with that opening statement, I will start to get going without any further delay. So I'll just jump directly to the first panelist, Tathagat. If I can start from you, based on in terms of if you can share your views in terms of the rules and some of the key observations from the Indian contest based on your work in the ground. And also, since you've worked a lot in the foreign countries and especially in the Middle East, what are the learnings from Middle East we can bring in? So three aspects, if you can set some light, that would be really great. So Tathagat,
thank you, Professor Dubey. I'm glad to be a part of this panel. To begin with, waste management, traditionally what we see on ground today, we rely on a lot of data. Now, data is rooted in its assumptions from 2011, which if we go down the line 14 years on, it is very difficult for us to make any kind of plans. And that is where a lot of our challenges also come in. That today, if we want to set up an infrastructure, we want to plan for the next 10 years, we do not know what is the current situation on ground. So if I look at some good practices from India, this is something that the Middle East also wants to emulate, which was the Swachh Sarvekshan. A lot of data has been collected over the last 10 years, but can we trust that data? Because a lot of that source of data, it is being collected by our ground authorities, but we do not know if that data is reliable because we do not have a baseline on to support that data. Now, when we look at the Middle East practices, or if we look at the European practices, their waste management systems are very grounded in very strong data governance systems. If I can talk about, if I talk about the Saudi Arabian context, now Saudi Arabia, they just came up with a new regulator for waste management. It is a central authority which is going to regulate all waste management activities. So they have a national database, they have a national data framework, which is managing all data related to waste management. And that helps them drive their master plans, right? If you look at the example of Germany, Germany has such detailed and robust data systems We talk a lot about EPR. EPR is end-to-end traceability of plastics and electronic waste today. But what Germany started back in 1994, they start at the manufacturing level, right? So from manufacturing, then the plastic becomes a waste, and then they start looking at what happens to that plastic. So data becomes central to any of our initiatives in waste management. We can have brilliant plans for waste management, but if we do not know what we are handling, how much we are handling, it is all, again, plans that we make, but on-ground implementation becomes a challenge. I'll stop at data for now. I have a lot more points. I'll keep coming back to them, Professor.
Thank you, Tathagat, for your initial points. So we will jump to Paramita. If you can talk about in terms of see, we have the when we talk about this urban areas for most. So we have these different apartment complexes. So bulk waste generators are also there. So how you see in terms of there as per the new rule, what are the responsibilities of these bulk waste generators, and then how they are being able to implement? So if you can talk about on that aspect, that would be great.
Thank you, Professor Dubey, and thanks to WasteWise for having me on this platform to share my views. So we have the Solid Waste Management Rules 2016 and the new rules, Solid Waste Management Rules 2024. It's still not been promulgated. It was supposed to be out in October, but it is still draft. However, what I would like to point out is that the rule on paper sounds very interesting and very stringent, but application on ground will definitely be a challenge. First of all, the new rule says that a bulk waste generator includes almost everyone. It includes, bus stations, airports, malls, multiplexes, wholesale markets, agriculture and horticulture produce markets, fish, meat, everybody, including the RWA. First of all, comparing these different heterogeneous bulk waste generators and the RWA is does not sound to be very, I would say, very fair, because as per this, everybody becomes a bulk waste generator. Number one. Number two, the new rules are saying that the waste should be segregated into 4 streams at source, which includes wet waste, dry waste, sanitary waste, and special care waste. So what used to be earlier called as domestic hazardous waste has been renamed as special care waste. So first of all, as of the rule of 2016, which talks about 3-way segregation, that itself has been a challenge. One is that the ULB is struggling to collect segregated at source waste, and the other is the behavior change part of the residents. Now, secondly, what I would like to say is the two aspects of behavior change and capacity building are a continuous process. And it is something that the government, or I would say, having worked with state government as well as urban local bodies, it is not exactly their forte. So there needs to be an intermediary organization who understands the people and who also understands what the government requires the people to do. So a civil society organization should always be there to bridge this gap between the government and the people. So just to give you an example, if we are looking at, we've been celebrating all the successful case studies, and they are now being called the Super Swatch League. So which is about, I think, more than 10 cities that are part of the Super Swatch League, which includes Indore, Surat, Navi Mumbai, Ambikapur, and many others. Now, all these cities have involved civil society to change the behavior of people, and they still are involved, and they have institutionalized this whole process. So if this rule has to be grounded, we have to continuously work with the people. And I think there's a primary difference between participatory governance or engagement of people. Participation and engagement are two different things. A lot of times we interchange the two things. But engaging means continuously evolving the process with the people, right from designing any particular policy to implementing it and further improving it. The other thing is it is talking about EPR for bulk waste generator. They're calling it extended bulk waste generator responsibility. Now that says that they should get a certificate, then they have to be audited every quarter and all of that. Now currently we have the Kabadiwala system, we have the itinerant buyers, we have the aggregators. All these people are there in the value chain. Now we can't just, and it's a very good indigenous system that has evolved over the years. Now I think there is a lot of confusion around whether when we talk of mainstreaming the waste pickers and kabadiwalas and formalizing them, they don't want, there is no need for them to be formalized, neither do they want to be formalized. They are small entrepreneurs and they're making good money out of what they do. What we need to do is institutionalize this whole process. Now, if they are saying that the bulk waste generator has to actually go and deposit all the segregated waste at a certain place, it doesn't really make economic sense. One, there'll be a lot of small vehicles which will have a lot of carbon footprint because they're going to be transporting this waste to the whatever MRF or whatever facility. When you have a kabadiwala coming to your house and buying the waste that has value or worth, why would you go all the way to drop this waste, right? So we need to tweak this and relook at this aspect of working with bulk waste generators. So I'll also stop there just to set the tone for the workshop, and then I'll keep coming back. Thank you.
Thank you, Paramita, for your opening remarks on this aspect. And I would encourage all the participants to put your questions on the Q&A. We are seeing a couple of them is already there, but as I said earlier, one of the key aspect of this webinar, especially on the Be Westwise platform, is that we try to engage with all the audience. So put your questions, your thoughts. It will be nice to discuss them as well. So now coming to Nidhi, who comes from West Warrior, and she has been working on the ground, especially in the hilly area. So Nidhi, if you can share your experiences in terms of the problems related to the implementation of policies and how you have held, your organizations have handled, what are the solutions that you are implementing from West Warrior, especially from the hilly area context. If you can talk about that, that'll be great.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Dubey, and hello and namaste to everybody in this webinar today. Thank you very much, Tathagat and Paramita, for setting up the tone very well, talking about data and then talking about the policy level changes which are happening currently. So as Professor Dubey said, that I'll be bringing in the ground insight. So yeah, the first thing is the data is lacking. Nobody knows what to do and how to go about all these things, how to plan. So one is that. The other thing is that nothing is happening on the ground, which Paramita mentioned, that we are talking about the four-way segregation. And then she said that two ways also very difficult. And in hilly regions like ours, in Himachal and Uttarakhand and the Northeast, even the collection of waste in itself is a challenge. Forget about two-way, three-way, and five-way segregation, because the terrain is such difficult that it is very difficult to deploy huge human resource into every nook and corner, every household. So the ground challenges are very different. And how do we bring this perspective while building policies, while framing these policies? And that is where the data lacks, right? Nobody is sharing the authentic and the real data. And one of the reasons why this happens is that there is a lot of mistrust in the ecosystem, that the communities don't trust the administration doesn't trust the civil societies don't trust the politicians, and this and that. So one of the major things that Waste Warriors has been doing for a very long time is that a lot of people call us a waste management organization, but we call ourselves as a stakeholder management organization. We are working on the ground, collecting all the data, doing all the real work on the ground, and building the trust among the communities and the administration. And so our job and our role is of the builders of bridges, so that all the entities and stakeholders in this whole ecosystem can start trusting each other and start sharing authentic data and the pain points and the suggestions. So that is one thing. The other thing is that, talking from the hilly regions, land is a huge issue. Paramita was mentioning about the behavior change. How do people start segregating waste? I can also see some people putting that up in the chat. Um, Now, BCC and IEC will work only if the infrastructure is there in place to support that. We keep asking people to segregate their waste, and then a waste worker ending up on their doorsteps and mixing that waste in one bag, one sack. The whole purpose is dissolved there, right? So it is very important, how do we put an infrastructure in place so that the IEC and BCC works? And that is the biggest challenge in hilly areas, because most of the land is forest land, and forest is not ready to give it its land for the construction of MRFs or landfills. And talking from Himachal, a lot of ULBs are still struggling to make MRFs or to make landfills, because they do not have the lands where to dispose of the waste, where to manage the waste. Forget about the rural areas, they don't even have anything if we start talking about that. So it is very important that how do we consider these insights from the ground at the central level and bring about some changes in the FRAs and the FCAs, so that, because it's not that the waste is being dumped in the urban areas or the rural areas. The waste, in the end, is being dumped in the forests only. So how does the forest departments bring in their powers into play and allows spaces where their MRS can be built, rather than throwing and disposing of the waste in the forest? It would be better if we can manage the waste in the forest. That will be more better for the areas. So that is also very important. And also, one of the major gaps is that one is the number gap, that the census has happened in 2011. We don't have the updated numbers of the population and the households and this and that. Also, we do not have the numbers around how much does it takes to collect waste from each household? How much does it take to process the garbage and the waste which is being collected? So at Waste Warriors, one of the most important things which we are doing is that we are capturing each and every data. So um, uh, I think I can request Akansha to put, yeah, she has already done that on the screen. So this whole narrative around waste is also very painful for the people who work on the grounds day and night, is the waste to wealth narrative. To be honest, there is no wealth as such in waste. If we start working in all categories of waste, if we are very specific and choosy that we'll be working in electronic waste and the high valuables, then okay, there can be some wealth in that. But if we talk about the characterization of waste, 50 to 80% of waste that comes to the MRS is low value or no value. So how do we glorify this whole thing of waste to wealth, waste to wealth? And that is why Waste Warriors has come up with this article on idea, where all of you can go and study what the data has been collected, how much money is going into the operations of waste management. Say in hilly regions, I can share some numbers here only. For us to collect waste from every household, it takes us 8 rupees per kg. And for the processing, means the segregation and transporting it to the end recycler, it takes us 11 rupees per kg. Is there any income in this? No, there isn't. There's around something 5 rupees per kg we can get in collection through the user fees. That's the only source while collecting the waste. User fee is the only source of revenue there. And while the processing is happening, the only source of revenue is um, the recyclables which are being sold out, right? That is 3 rupees per kg. So there's a huge gap. Who is filling this gap? Nobody is filling in this gap. Is the policy helping bridge this gap of the operations and the processing cost that incurs on the field? That is something which needs to happen. But the problem is, will the corporations and the councils and the Nagar Panchayats share this data with the state and the center government? No, because everybody wants to be fair, to be, saved. Nobody wants any risk on their job. So they are just trying to cover up each other. So that is one thing which Waste Warriors has been trying, that we have been. So one is that we work on the ground, collate all this data and share it with the people sitting in the state and the center, so that all the policymakers, we know everybody is good hearted, everybody wants to do good stuff, but that will only happen if they are well informed. So the second thing which we are doing is that we are sharing this authentic data with the policymakers so that their decisions are data driven, very important. And then we are also helping the corporations, the urban areas and the rural areas set up some infrastructure, because there is a lot of mistrust. Again, coming back to the mistrust, that people have not seen good examples in India. Most of us have seen dump sites. Most of us have seen landfills. So there are a lot of cases where people retaliate and oppose if any site comes up in their surroundings. They do not want any waste management site coming up in their locations. We always have to cite for Indore or Ambikapur and Mysore, which are so far from the Himalayas. We can't take all the peoples from Himalaya to these places and make them trust the whole process. That is why we are trying to do this, build some models across the Himalayan states so that people start trusting each other, from the Safai Sathis to the administration, to the communities and to the civil society organizations. And Paramita mentioned a very important point, that there is a very important role that the civil society organizations will play. But how do we put that into the process? How do we institutionalize that? Because a lot of times what challenge organizations like us face is that, okay, we don't have the money, where do we support you? CSR says that, okay, things need to be sustainable. We should have processes. The government should be able to uh, make this whole process sustainable. And the government says, okay, we'll bring in the money from CSRs. So the civil societies are in the middle, trying to juggle between the CSR partners and the governments, both of them wanting the systems to be sustainable and willing and semi unwilling to support in the whole process. So I'll also stop here and let the other members share the viewpoints.
Thank you, Nidhi, for sharing your experience from on-ground experience, especially in the hilly areas. It becomes more challenging. All of us kind of know. So it was really nice to have you on the panel to kind of bring that perspective. So then we can move to Professor Uday Shankar. So Professor Uday, you talk about always in terms of advocacy, like bringing your. I remember you talking about the idea of implementing law through advocacy. So if you can elaborate on that point, like what exactly you mean by that, how we can effectively implement these legal obligations through advocacy, using advocacy as a good strategy. So, Professor Uday, floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Dubey, for. Am I audible? I believe.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So thank you, Professor Dubey, and everyone for having me on this interesting panel, which certainly to me is on a subject where we need to look at the law and legal framework from a different perspective altogether. Because generally, when you talk about the West, somehow it seems that the moment we look at the role of the government and the governmental institutions, as a citizen, we get tended to withdraw. That's the problem. I mean, and there where I believe is a challenge coming up. Because it is not that the waste generation is a new phenomena and it is something with the current society or civilization. It has always been there. But then, to my understanding, somewhere it has been connected with the individual, and possibly the solution was also coming from individual. So now, when I look at this set of this kind of laws, I strongly believe that we need to look for a different strategy altogether for effective implementation. What, according to me, could be an effective strategy? To me, effective strategy could be that how well informed citizens are. And when I say well informed citizens are, it has to be in terms of not only understanding the implications, but also in terms of that the very cause for which these laws are being made are made for society made for individual as well as it is for the entire ecosystem. So we need to understand that how, when these rules are being made, how these rules are really talking about strengthening the ecosystem at the ground level, strengthening the individual's ability to contribute. For example, now the new proposed rules talk about the extension of the rules to the rural areas, and then it talks about the engagement, with the technology or employment of the technology. Now, look at the kind of dichotomy what we are dealing with. It is the Ministry of Environment which makes the rule. It is the Ministry of Urban who has got a responsibility to get it implemented at the ground level. And on the top of it, you are asking the local bodies to be at the opening batsman, and knowing very well that their strength is very, very poor. They are possibly not even playing first class cricket in terms of financial capacity, in terms of revenue generation. They are heavily dependent upon the state and the centers. Now, if that is the case, you are making the rules where you are sort of coming up with a structure which possibly is not going to work unless and until you empower the people in terms of involving them. So when you say segregation at source level, now when you say segregation at the source level, it has to be done in such a way that if you are not segregating, it's not only you are violating rules. It is all about you are contributing to a very kind of dark pages for your next generation, or something which is to be presented in that way. So that's how I look at the very role of advocacy. And this kind of law and legal system, the subjects which rules deal with, can better be implemented with a collaborative approach, with non approach, that how law has been dealing with the responsibles with iron handed, how effectively are imposing fines. No, it should be something like doing a campaign, the local level, campaign in the local language, and I'm indicating very categorically that it's a collective responsibility. It is not the responsibility of the state. It is possibly the state comes in as a kind of role of establishing a common platform for all of us. That's how the state's role should be seen here. So that's what I would say, that as a law person, generally we try to measure the strength of law, that how good the code of law is in giving a kind of determined verdict. In this kind of laws, we should look beyond the code of law. We should not look at the efficacy, how good the judgments are. We should look at the efficacy, that how least number of cases are reaching to the code of law, or even to the adjudicatory bodies for that matter. That's how I would say is the kind of parameter we need to look at it. So these are my preliminary thoughts on the subject.
Thank you, Professor Uday, and we'll get back to you as we will be looking at the questions. So we are kind of in the first round. We had initial kind of thoughts and reactions and discussion points from each of the panel. Then we will now I'll start looking at the question, and as well as trying to mix together with some of the other things that I think you can talk about. So starting with the questions, if we can start with Tathagat, if I can start with you. There is a question from Mr. Manoj Singh Shekhawat. Actually, his handles solid waste management on ground at Jamshedpur city. So he's talking about that kind of AI based, and AI is a hot topic today, isn't it? So AI based segregation, tracking, and GPS of waste transport monitoring, will that help a city like Jamshedpur or some other cities as well in terms of real compliance as well, transparency. And if I can link it with the data as well, since you talked about, we all talked about data. So data is a big question mark. So can AI help us in terms of having a better data management so that we know what we are actually dealing with? Most of the places, as most of the panelists, you said that we don't even know what we are dealing with. We are just trying to make something work, but we don't have the basic data to support our design and all those implementation plans. So Tathadak, you can start, and if
Yes.
anybody else wants to chime in, please do that. Yeah, please.
Yes. So Professor Dubey, the way we look at AI, let's look at first what AI is, and then how does AI feature into waste management. Now, AI would technically work when you have data.
Yeah.
You are trying to build on prediction models with very little data that you have. But today we do not have that. So before we even go to that extreme step of trying to get AI into our processing systems or into our waste management value chains, we need to first establish that baseline, which I keep talking about, that the waste data framework needs to be developed. And I think the government should be working on that. But also at the same time, I would chime in with Mr. Uday Shankar that when we look at the different authorities that are working within waste management, now, at JSW Foundation, we work in a number of states. We work with the rural communities. But what we have seen as a challenge that we work on CSR, but the accountability on ground has been very different from what we envisage at a national level. That waste management is supposed to be the responsibility of authorities. But as CSR, it gets pushed onto the civil societies that since you are funding, you take care of everything. And that becomes a challenge because after 3-4 years, we have to exit these projects. So the entire notion behind having an intervention and ensuring that we did something sustainable in the long run, that once we exit, these systems will continue. That becomes very difficult because the handover does not happen over 4 years. Behavior change will never happen over 4 years. It is a very long process. It will take 10 years, 15 years. And that is what you're seeing in Indore and Navi Mumbai. They have taken a very long time to get to where they are today. So that accountability and reinforcing it or maybe aligning it with CSR laws, that is something that needs to be pushed in.
So, so in terms of data, that is like we were talking about data.
Yeah.
So how to really make this data up? Like, what is the see? When I work with some cities, and Paramita will probably has a lot of experience working there. They most of the ULBs, they feel like that the data collection part is a waste of their money. they whatever the hodgepodge data they have, they want us to work with that. And we know that the data is not correct. So maybe Tathagat, if you want to say something on that, then I'll, Paramita, if you can, because I wanted you to answer that question as well. And Nidhi, you can talk about that too, if you have something. Yeah, Tathagat.
So when I look at data now, waste management, I also look at it as an industry. So if you're going to rely on governance to be your backing for data, obviously any authority is going to find it cumbersome. But the day you classify waste management as an industry, whoever runs these institutions, they know they have to make money no matter what happens. They will ensure that they collect that data. And you can mandate it that this data has to be provided to the government. The government, in turn, obviously through our various mechanisms, we can access that data. But that initial collection has to be through the private sector. We will not be able to rely on government sources for data.
Mm-hmm. So, Paramita, if you want to, yeah, please go ahead.
So it's not that ULBs don't have the data. They have the data, but there are many forces working, there. So first of all, there are some bigger ULBs, particularly thanks to the Smart Cities mission. The cities which have an integrated command and control center, where the data related to waste has been integrated into the system, they have that data. But the question comes is that there are many push and pulls working, due to which they are unable to share the data publicly, number one. Number two,
Just
there's
to,
a
just to interact, like, do you think they have good quality data though? Like many times, because I have seen 3 reports, 3 different data of the
yeah, I
same
was
thing.
coming to that.
Yeah.
So wherever there are these ICCC, there is a certain level of data. The data is also dynamic and in real time. But their government or agencies do not always have the inclination to analyze the data to help in improving the whole institutional process. So that is one. So there is a lot of data sitting, whatever quality, even if we are saying that it is of not great quality, but even that data is not getting used to improve and design the processes, number one. Number two, as Tathagat said, that there has to be a business motive towards having good quality data so that we're looking at waste as an industry. So that perspective towards waste is still not changing. The common citizens thinks that waste is something that the government is supposed to look at, and there is no contribution that they can do. Number two, we uh, unless it's like setting up maybe a waste to energy plant or something as glamorous as that, the knowledge about the possibilities of jobs and entrepreneurship in the waste sector is very scanty among the normal common persons. In fact, I was actually deliberating on this with some people who have the power to give money for this, and I said there is a requirement to have a robust database to understand how much the waste sector can offer in terms of jobs and entrepreneurship. This will be a win-win for everyone, for the political leadership, for the administrative leadership, and for the people as well. But to get such a, because it's going to, India being so vast, this kind of study will require a lot of resources. Now, who will bell the cat is the question. Who will put in these resources? Who will take the ownership of this data? Because this data cannot be a standalone data. It has to be dynamic. It has to be regularly updated, upgraded. So that's the entire debate around data and governance.
Mhm. So Nidhi, you wanted to add something on, especially from the hilly area point of view. Just of not, we can take the discussion a bit more now. Like based on your experience on the field, of course, the data is there, but what do you think will really work, and what are the changes if you want to rewrite the rule? So, for example, what like 1 or 2 major things you would want to see? Uh, Maybe a separate rule for hilly area, or maybe some subsection within that for hilly area. So what are the maybe 2, 3 important points based on your experience, if you can highlight that?
Um, yeah, so I was also discussing this with one of my team members that do we need separate rules for the hilly areas? But India being such a dynamic country, we cannot have policies and rules for every state and every region differently. That would be so difficult for the people sitting there. But then, yes, subsections are very important. Customizing and tweaking the policies contextually to the locations is very important. So I think the basics needs to be sorted. We talk about a lot of big things happening, this and that. I think we need to sort the basics first. Segregation at source and the basic infrastructure. We need a MRF, we need a wet waste processing unit, and we need a landfill, a scientific landfill, because in a lot of places we don't even find landfills, right? They call dump sites as landfills. So we need to sort the basics, and from there we can build a lot. If the foundation is weak, no matter how much technology, AI we bring in, that is not going to happen. So it's very, so if I have to do something, I'll sort the basics in the beginning, invest in these basic facilities, infrastructure at first, and then the behavioral change thing which needs to happen for a long term. 3 years projects are not going to bring changes, as Tathagat also mentioned. It takes a generation to bring about some change. So we need to invest in a generation in the current the Gen Zs, maybe we need to imbibe these qualities in them so that we have a promising future. And also, we need to strengthen the EPR thing, the EPR system. We talk, And that also needs to be uniformly distributed across the nation, because it is very beneficial for the places which have high quantums. But in the hilly regions, the population is so scattered and the quantums are so low that we never get the benefit of EPR. From our personal experience of working in waste management, we have got 1 rupees per kg in EPR. So how is that going to happen? So I think we need to somebody. Okay, yeah. So yes, sorting the basics, and then simultaneously working on EPR and plastic credits and the other policy high level things, so that those can be trickled down in a timely manner to the ULBs. And also the capacity building is very important, because everybody mentioned that the ULBs are not ready to take up all these responsibilities. Now, how do we make them capable of doing all these things? We were talking about data. How do we build the capacities of the ULBs and the RLBs around quality data collection? Because what usually happens is that they are just putting in numbers for formalities. I mean, I can cite one example which I currently have been facing in one of my locations, that we have been sharing data from one specific region in Himachal, and the coordinator from that area doesn't want to reflect that data on the SBM dashboard, because the other districts are underreporting. So he's under the impression that if I report the actual data, people will question me that how is so high quantums of waste in your area coming up? How is this possible? So he's scared of justifying that this is the quantum which is being generated in my areas, because the others in the state and the adjoining states are underreporting. So how do we collectively build? One single person cannot bring about the change. We can start the thing to happen, but we need more champions in the system. So we capacity building is one that needs to happen at the ground level. How do we make the whole system efficient? Organizations like ours are ready to help the ULBs and the RLBs doing all these jobs, because we also understand that they do not have the human resource. One, the number is not there with them because they are always understaffed, and also the expertise and the passion and the capacities also. So we are ready to pitch in for that. But how do we build the whole ecosystem? Because again, I'll bring this back to the CSR partners also, that how do we uniformly spread the CSR funding also? Not very high visibility areas or the places which are populous or who have high quantums, but also to far-flung areas, because waste is being generated in every nook and corner. Waste is being generated in the Pangi Valley of Himachal, which is the most remotest areas. Will some CSR partner help us do waste management in that region? That is a question. So again, going back to the policy level, that how do we form the CSR policies also in such a way that they are uniformly distributed in all the locations?
So yeah, thank you, Nidhi. And then we have several questions, so we have to kind of get going with that, and we are kind of getting towards the time as well. So maybe more short and crisp answers will help so that we can get to all those. So coming to Gurudatta Tendulkar, he's working in this area for a long time. I think some of you might be knowing as well. So his question is, if the rules are good enough, but who will be the talking about the accountability, the responsibility of the municipal officer is always questionable. So Professor Uday, if you can talk about like how to, as you were talking about all those aspects, so how to make these municipal officers more responsible in terms of getting this rule properly implemented. Professor Uday, are you there?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah, you are. Please go ahead.
Okay, so the question sounds very good in terms of accountability, but then before we start talking on accountability, we first have to really assess that whether we have equipped the officer before ensuring his accountability. So there where the challenge comes to my mind when I look at it from the policy perspective, that whether enough kind of support system has been provided to the municipal officer, and then we are talking about the accountability. There where the challenge lies to me, that the support system somewhere, for example, I was just following research of all of you, that you have been talking about the engagement of technology, you have been talking about the data collection and making that data a kind of workable one in terms of guiding the policymakers or looking at the real-time challenges. Now, when you look at the municipal officers in India, I really doubt that how far they are having necessary competence to really uh, discharge the responsibility in an effective way. So, before we talk about the accountability, I think we must talk about uh, the, the competence, the support system, and the very, I would say, uh, effective engagement of municipality or municipal officers in deciding on the methods of uh, waste management, because how you have involved him in the entire process, or is it like something you have directed him that this is something to be done and possibly he knows the challenges of his area much better. So I believe when I look at it from the very perspective of implementing the rules or the law at the ground level, we must acknowledge that the one who has been entrusted with the responsibility, he must be also part of the decision making process. Uh, if you are not making him part of the decision making process, believe me, you'll always have these challenges in terms of uh, uh, in terms of either accountability, in terms of inefficiency. So I think the larger question here one should look at is that uh, how is the person who has been made accountable under the law has been placed by the entire structuring. Is he been empowered if sufficiently? Is the empowerment here only through the legal provisions? Is the empowerment also in terms of technology? Is the empowerment also in terms of capacity building? Because see, look at it, the biggest challenge when you talk about local, urban local bodies in India, uh, whatever I believe is that there's nothing called urban local bodies cadre, which is missing. I mean, so if there's no cadre, meaning thereby there's no belongingness. So today I'm serving at the block level. Tomorrow I'll be serving the state government in a different cadre altogether. So these are also the issues which possibly appears to be not directly connected, but to my understanding that these are the issues which are uh, to be addressed in order to make the rules uh, really workable at the ground level. Thank you, Professor Dubey.
So thank you, Professor Uday. There are still many questions are there, so we'll get to that one by one. And so there's a question from Dr. David Wilson, where he is talking about he basically has a question for Nidhi as well as for Dr. Paramita. So like how, in terms of our circular economy progress, I guess the need to complete the earlier steps of bringing all communities up to the basic SDG. He's talking about SDG 11.6.1. So in terms of universal waste collection and controlled disposal, phasing out open dumping and burning. So unless we do that, how we are going to meet circular economy, and that others can also chime in. He has kind of asked, and for Dr. Paramita, if you can talk about that, how can you ensure that source segregation by the formal municipal solid waste management system does not interfere with the existing informal system, which actually informal system does a wonderful job, as Professor Wilson is talking about, and I also, like most of us, do agree with that. So how can the new rule strengthen and build the existing informal recyclers? So maybe Nidhi, you can start, and then Paramita, and then Tathagat, you can also chime into that here.
Yeah, so to reach at the level of circular economy, again, coming back, that we need to sort the basics, and that will again happen if we are able to put in the right infrastructure, capacity building, all these small things which won't take a lot of um, money and time also. We just need to dedicate some people into all these units, all these bodies, and just one more resource person. I know it can be heavy for the government, but then there are resources that can provide the external help, and a little bit of change in the system can help improve the whole process. And we are not very far. If the segregation efficiency improves, the resource recovery automatically is going to happen, and the whole cycle, because there is no problem related to the circular economy, because there are, even though there are informal sectors, but the sector in itself, the waste management sector, is very strong in India. So the circularity won't be a problem. It's just that how do we bring in the quality product into the whole market, and then that material can be recovered in a better manner and then channelized to the further processing, and which will lead to the circular economy. And then a little bit tweaks in the EPR policies will be a great help.
Yeah, Paramita, if you want.
Yeah, so as I said in the beginning, that the informal waste workers, whether it is the kabadiwalas or the waste pickers, we are what experts believe, and is that they don't need to be formalized, but they need to be integrated. So there's a little bit of difference in that. So by formalize, the ULB thinks that they have to be taken on their staff as one of the staff, they have to be salaried, they have to be given facilities. No, you give them the right to pick up the waste which they have been picking up, and give them and what can be done is that you can fix the rates for different products, that you can sell high value plastic at this rate or cardboard as this rate, and a range can be fixed, and then they can be paid based on the amount they're collecting. As of now also, even in the MRF, what is happening, only the waste that has very low calorific value, it has no recycle or reuse uh, capability, is coming to the MRF. So MRF, for that matter, if you look at it from a very macro perspective, is actually a mini dump site. What comes to the MRF ultimately will go to a secure landfill. So that is the way we should look at MRF, not as some private guy will come up, establish an MRF and take away all the high value thing, because then you're totally ignoring the so-called informal or parallel, I would say it's a parallel ecosystem or parallel system that is working. So if that has been working very well throughout the years, why not integrate them? And as someone talked about Indore is a different example, but in Ambikapur, they have actually done this. They have integrated the kabadiwalas into the entire system, and that is why this system is working smoothly till date. The second thing I would like to comment about capacity building is, first of all, capacity building is not small expenditure. It's a good deal of expenditure. And there is actually resources earmarked for capacity building. What becomes a little cumbersome is that capacity building needs to be linked to projects on ground. So that's why right now what we are talking with the ministry, because we have a knowledge management unit that has recently been set up at NIUA, we are saying let's give them training based on the demand, that it should be demand driven and not supply driven. So we are going about doing a training needs assessment, and based on that, on some priority areas like how to set up a biomethanation plant, how to run it efficiently, what are the aspects that are needed to have a robust DPR for a, say, I'm just taking one example of biomethanation. So even if ULB is not going to make the DPR for, say, a biomethanation plant, if they have to give it to a consultant, they should know what the consultant should give to them. What is the ask from the consultant? Even that kind of capacity is not there in all urban local bodies, because we have several types of urban local bodies varying on size, geography, and all that. So capacity building should not be a one-off, because the behavior change, communication, IEC, capacity building, they're part of the same bucket. But each one should have a different strategy, and it has to be continuous continuous over, it has to be dynamic and continuous. People will keep coming into the sector, people will retire from the sector. So for new people, there's a certain type of capacity building you need to do. For mid-career people, there's a certain type of capacity building need to do. And for those who have been in the sector and have good practical knowledge, they also need to become contributors in the whole capacity building process. So I'll stop there in view of the time.
Tathagat, if you can talk on that, and you can make it slightly
Mm,
broader as well in terms
Yeah.
of some of the other aspects of rules. Yeah.
Yes. So in the prior rules from 2016, there was a lot of talk about, so as Paramita mentioned, that MRFs generally tend to have these low value plastics or reject waste that ends up accumulating at these MRFs. Now, what the rules have constantly said, or the ministries have constantly said, that these sorts of waste should ideally be disposed at cement factories or at some power plant. Now, there is a requirement. I can say this from a fact that at JSW, we have been asking for these wastes, but there is a challenge on supply chain that if you tell us that you can supply us 1 ton of RDF, you need to commit to that for the next 5 years or the next 10 years, because as JSW, we are also going to make changes to our boiler designs. But no one is able to give us that commitment. So end of the day, that waste ends up in a quarry site or in another dump site. It moves from the MRF onto another site. Going on to the second part, what Paramita was talking about, the capacities. Now, one very interesting part in terms of budget allocation that Swachh Bharat Gramin had was allocating 3.75% of the budget given to a district was to be used for HR and capacity building. Now, whether they could use it or not, that is a very different case. The districts were not empowered enough to decide what it has to be used on. They would hire consultants using that budget head. But end of the day, that budget was always returned back to the state and then onto the center. There was always budget available. But surprisingly, this kind of budget is not made available to ULBs because ULBs get a very different type of financing system. So that we can see good systems in both rural and urban areas. We need to come to a common ground where we can take the best of both sides because they have worked. It's not that waste management is wildly different in the rural areas and very different in the urban areas. There are common grounds. We need to bring both of them together.
So good. We will probably take few more questions, although it is slightly over time. So, Paramita, there's a question on can Mahua they can launch a project where they can put all these GPS on different devices, and like something that he's talking about, that something like Swachh Nagar Mahua launched earlier. So I think since you work very closely with Mahua, so I thought you might be aware, and if you can answer that. It is question from Apurva Sahu. I think you can see it on the Q&A as well. Yeah.
Okay. So do you mean GPS in all the vehicles that are there, or what
I think
exactly?
that's what he's talking about, like GPS in all the vehicle and
Okay.
and the
So
traffic conservation, you can get a lot of marks if you have GPS on the vehicle. So that's
yeah,
what.
but GPS is expensive. I mean, not very expensive, but not all urban local bodies are able to afford it. And just having a GPS on the vehicle will not work. It has to be part of a system. So establishing that entire command and control center to integrate all the GPSs and to integrate it with other aspects is what becomes a challenge for most urban local bodies. As you know, that mostly ULBs are struggling with resources. So wherever it has worked, the GPS system has worked, is mostly where they have done a convergence. So convergence of funding from several sources is what we need to look into. So in case of GPS and using AI and integrated systems is where the Swachh Bharat money as well as the Smart City Mission money have been put together in one kitty and it has worked. So now we need to see, now we are coming up with the Urban Challenge Fund and all of that. So we need to see how integration, for me, as somebody who's been in the urban sector for some time now, I feel most of the time we are working in silos. And wherever there is a champion who has done integration, so I know that the name of Ambikapur keeps coming in all the time, but it is a perfect example of integration. It is an integration of Swachh Bharat Mission and the National Urban Livelihood Mission. That is why it's a successful case of a SHG driven model. And thirdly, the fact that there was a champion who could imagine this integration and institutionalize this whole thing and created an integrated team who till date is working together, because champions like administrators or even elected representatives, they'll keep coming and going. So they, as one of the experts once told me, that we, as Ritu Sen, I'd rather quote her, she said, we are like migratory birds, right? But it is the lake or the forest or the ecosystem that has to know the role that migratory birds have played and they thrive. So
Mhm.
that's the whole thing about, so GPS is also part of that integration.
Yeah. So there's another question is that which way maybe you can also Tathagat and can talk about as well. Although question is on to Dr. Paramita, that how to make it as an industry, as Tathagat mentioned earlier. Of course, data collection is important, but what else will be needed to bring it kind of an industry? Waste management becomes an industry where we can so economics will become important. Which is all important even now, but it will be more looked in a different perspective. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So when we talk about waste management as an industry, now the challenge that we see as a foundation, what we have seen on ground, that it is seen more as a social initiative, that whatever your interventions are, there is no concept of user fee, there is no concept of trying to recover costs, right? Now, when you try implementing a business model, that is what the private sector incentivization has to happen. That if today, for example, a private entity comes in, they need to understand where do they make the money, right? No one's going to give you free service. So that blanket understanding that you will charge 30 rupees per month from each household or 50 rupees from each household, that is not going to work, right? In the long run, you will have to understand what your costs are, how much can you recover from your daily operations, and whatever the shortfall is, that is where user fee comes in. So having a very holistic view of the waste management operations, that is something a business model will give you, right? And when you do these calculations, you'll be able to understand. I have been able to do it for this integrated system that we are setting up here in Dolvi in Maharashtra, where we are covering 12 panchayats at the moment. Our user fee is as low as 5 rupees per household, because we have that end market that we are working back with the government. We are working with SHGs to try and offset the costs involved in waste management. So we don't want to put a lot of pressure on households when it comes to finances, but it has to run on an economic sense. And for that, we need these business models to come in. And obviously, private investment will flow in when you see some form of money in the operations.
Okay, so I think we have already 6:14, which is 14 minutes over the time. So maybe if you have anything to add, maybe another 20, 30 seconds. Nidhi, if you want to say something overall, if you want to, and then we will ask Uday if he has something to say at the end. Nidhi, if
Sure.
you have.
Yes. So I think what will help everybody in the ecosystem is that coming together is very important to share our learnings and failures. Most importantly, is very important because everybody has been working in silos. We all have learnings. We all have failures. It is very important if we can bring everybody on the same page, which is very difficult. But there are people who are willing to share the information and resources. Waste Warriors is one such organization ready to share whatever database we have. So it's important that like-minded people come together and help solve the crisis. And we are hopeful also that the
Sure.
the gap which is there between the policies and the practices will eventually fill up. Thank you.
So I also see Dr. Wilson on is still there joining with us. So Dr. Wilson, if you want to have some words of Akanksha, can you make him? Yeah, Professor Wilson, if you want to, some word of wisdom from you is always good for all, for young people. Like you are very young, but but for us, yeah, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I found that today extremely interesting, and I think all I can say is keep up the good work. I mean, following up the two questions, I think it's important to balance the moving forward to the next steps with making sure that everybody catches up with what you have done already. And in addition, you have a wonderful system of recycling already working. You talked a lot about data. I don't know if there is any data on how efficient, what the recycling rate is from the current recyclers. I have seen figures of 25 or 30%, which is very significant. I've also seen examples of new initiatives where an MRF is set up by the city in direct competition with the recyclers. And that if the money that had been spent on that MRF, which is getting 0.something% recycling, had been used to reinforce and build on what you're already doing, you might have got the existing recycling rate up from 20% to 40%, which clearly is a better use of resources. So, it is extremely interesting to hear what you're doing, and good luck as you move forward.
Thank you, sir. So Professor Uday Shankar, any final thoughts before we close it? We are almost. Professor Uday, are you there? Or maybe not. So that's fine. So we will. It's Akanksha now. Floor is yours for the closing.
Oh, thank you. Professor Dubey, and thank you so much to all our panelists. And I can still see, and I would appreciate all the attendees still hooked up to this session. As I've already mentioned, this webinar is recorded and will be uploaded on our YouTube channel and on our website in a week's time. And if you like to stay updated on future events, and if there are certain points or discussion points, some areas that you want us to cover, some topics that you want us to cover, we request you to please share it with us. And as I think most of the speakers have already shared the LinkedIn profiles, you can connect to them personally. If there are certain queries which are still unanswered, we would definitely pass on to the speakers. Thank you so much to the panel and to all the attendees. Good day to everybody.